a crisis situation, if I take responsibility for myself, I can learn something positive about myself. I learn I can handle this crisis situation. And the child can also learn something positive about themselves. They can learn I can de-escalate, I can calm down, I can make the right choices, I can turn things around. Does that make sense? Sometimes, even in a positive situation, adults will turn that around and take something that's positive and they teach the child something negative about themselves. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that, but I see that with parents sometimes. They're just like, oh, that was an opportunity to teach that child something positive and you just told them something negative about themselves. So think about that we always want to be learning positive things about ourselves, and the child should learn that as well. All right, composure is a prerequisite adults need before disciplining children. So focus on your own composure before addressing the child's behavior. That is a big one, because oftentimes a child starts acting in a crazy way and we feel responsible and we just immediately act on that because we feel like we have to stop it. Instead, the very, very first thing you should think of is how to handle yourself. So that's a big shift in what I do when I'm handling a situation, is I just think, how can I control myself in this situation? Because then I know the right things are going to come to me. Yeah, there might be something I have to do, but I've got to take care of myself first. So stop, take a deep breath and relax. Say to yourself, I'm safe, keep breathing, I can handle this. You guys saw kind of an example of that in the video where she used self-talk. And then if you're with the child, remind the child, you are safe, breathe with me, we can handle this, we can do this. So instead of seeing the child as the enemy, the real enemy is the crisis. The real enemy is everybody being escalated. And so as an adult, I have to take control of that and help everybody calm down so we can face that. Does that make sense? Healthy, secure relationships require that we take responsibility for our own upset. Whoever you have placed in charge of your emotions, you have placed in charge of you. Applying this is a radical concept with radical results. So, sounds really simple, but how many times do we say, such and such made me angry, you made me mad, you made me sad, you hurt my feelings. So we get to be in control of ourselves. We don't want to put someone else in charge of us. When we truly lose control is when we lose control of ourselves. Conflict requires two participants. We can learn to trust ourselves in any situation. Once we can trust ourselves in our response, we no longer have to fear what others might do or say. We maintain control through maintaining composure. When I have this trust in myself, I am trustworthy to others. Composure is my superpower. People pick that up about me because I've been in situations where teenagers are throwing chairs at me, they're breaking windows, they're climbing the walls, and I know in myself, hey, I might not be able to stop what they're doing, but I can handle myself. And that gives me that confidence, and then people have confidence in me that I'm trustworthy. So we can learn that about ourselves. We can handle anything. So I want to tell you about my role model in composure. His name was Chris Megan, and he worked at the residential treatment center I worked at. He was a big, tall guy, about 6'2", but not super burly, just kind of a regular guy. But he had worked in residential treatment for years and years, started as a floor staff and worked his way up to management. And when we would have a crisis and had to call Chris Megan onto the scene, you knew that the second he walked in that room, the crisis was going to come down, because when he walked in the room, he walked in like he was coming to a college dorm party. He opened the door, kind of sauntered in and said, hey, what up? He just did not buy into that crisis for 1 second, and then it just brought everything down because he had that confidence. You're not going to shake me. I'm just here hanging out. So I learned a lot from that. All right, does anybody Douglas Adams fan know for our first response to a crisis? Nobody does Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So it's don't panic. So first rule of the universe, my brother was very into the Douglas Adams books. You guys should read them, they're funny. But first law, don't panic. And that's kind of become my motto. And then another personal motto I have, there is no crisis. So again, working in residential treatment, you have crises, at least several a week, if not every day. And you just kind of have to learn this isn't really a crisis. It's just trying to convince me that it is. So we can handle a situation with a 4-year-old or a 40-year-old with a gun equally well if we are able to separate ourselves from the crisis. Once we buy into the crisis that the child is creating, we further escalate the situation. We may contain the situation for the moment, but it's almost guaranteed to happen again. So I compare those two. What do those two have in common? The 4-year-old and the 40-year-old with a gun. What do you guys think they have in common?
They're looking for attention.
Okay, they got our attention, didn't they?
Looking for that attention,
Yeah. Yeah, they seem to have control, don't they? They seem to be kind of controlling the entire atmosphere of the situation. So I compare those two because the 4-year-old is equally as good at getting people in that crisis and convincing us something is really wrong, right? And I have to not buy into that equally well, whatever the situation. The second reason I compare those is because 40-year-old with the gun, I'm going to be respectful to that. I'm going to apply my de-escalation skills. I'm not going to try to escalate him or grab him or push him. A lot of times with the 4-year-old, we do those things, right? We kind of further escalate it. Now, that's extreme because, yes, you can do things to contain the 4-year-old. So I'm not saying you have to not contain him, but you should still be respectful. You should use de-escalation. You should use compassion and try to de-escalate the situation instead of getting him to explode further. Does that make sense? Oftentimes we have the ability to work through the situation and make progress, but we lose confidence due to outside pressures such as other parents' complaints or a timeline that's taking longer than we first expected. When we maintain confidence, we maintain control of the situation. When we focus on our application of skills instead of the child's application of skills, we are able to take the steps that are needed to keep making progress. So, has anybody ever experienced that? You have this confidence, oh, we can work through this with this child, but suddenly you're getting pressure from parents, you're getting other parents complaining, maybe teachers are complaining, and you kind of lose confidence in that. So we always have to refocus on ourselves and what we know and what we can do. We can't control the child. So, all right, so this goes to your worksheet. We're just going to do a little exercise here about triggers. So if I'm going to maintain composure, it all sounds great. I'm sure I wouldn't be triggered at all if somebody had a gun, right? Of course I would. I hope I never have to face that situation. So we all have triggers. We all have things that can get us escalated, that can get us upset. So in order to have composure, we've got to be able to identify those, right? We've got to have that self-awareness. So we're just on your worksheet. We're going to try to identify a few triggers. Did everybody take the time to identify their child that they have in mind? So think about that child's behaviors, and we're going to try to think of maybe some shoulds you have for that child. So an example of shoulds: children should listen to the teacher. Children should be respectful to adults. Children should be seen and not heard. Children shouldn't hit. So see if you can just take a minute and identify maybe a few shoulds about the behavior you wrote down. All right, and then the next one, identify assumed intent. So that's where we give intent to the child's behavior. You're doing this to make me mad. You're purposely trying to hurt me. I remember my mom would do that to me. We would leave coat hangers hanging on the side of our bed, which we weren't supposed to do. And she would come in and give us a whole lecture about how we had purposefully done that to hurt her, which... I can see that was extreme, but we all have things like that. So try to think of what you're assuming that child's intent is. One I hear a lot is he's manipulating. That's my favorite because that child knows how to get his needs met, so good for him. We're the ones who have to change our behavior, not the child. All right, and then any labeling that you have. So this child is a bully. This child is always disrupting my classroom. This child has no manners. So just any labeling that you might give. This child is lazy. And you may not have all 4 of these, but just do your best. And then the last one is our should response. So this is kind of the heaviest one, is we put a lot of shoulds on ourselves. So when a child talks back, they should be spanked. When a child doesn't listen, they should get in trouble. This is what other people might be kind of saying in your ear. This might be your mom's voice or your teacher's voice, or another voice in your ear saying, oh, but you should handle it this way. Oh, but they should get in trouble. Right? So see if you can think of some of those. So the idea of this is that once we sort out our own assumptions and perceptions, we can actually start to get a clear view of what's actually happening. Once we have all these things out of the way. One of the purposes of me coming in is I can view it without these things. And that's my job, that's my role. But when we're in the middle of it with a kid, it's much harder to do because all of these things get in our way. You guys have any questions about this?
I just was thinking that I noticed this in the school system, providing like advocacy for kids, that once the teacher had gone to that, they're doing this to make me angry or whatever, then they were done trying.
Yeah, that's it.
So everything else didn't matter.
Absolutely.
After that, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Once you have these really negative perceptions of a child, there is nothing I can help you do to work with that child. The first thing we have to do is kind of get these things out of the way, for sure. And that'll go also towards that positive intent that we may get to in this training. It's one of the most important things, I think. So yeah, we get in our own way a lot. All right, so we're going to move on to connection. Did anybody have any questions or comments about composure? What do you guys think? A worthwhile skill to work on? Who thinks that they could work on it? Need some work on it? Cool. We all could. I saw plenty of things that trigger me too. So, all right. So connection. This is my +1 because I think it's so important. The concept is maintaining awareness of ourselves and our interrelatedness with others. So. We don't live in a vacuum. Our attitudes and actions have far-reaching impact, both small and large. We are also impacted by others in the environment. So we can't separate the child from the environment. We can't separate ourselves from the environment. We're all connected and related to each other. Others around us offer constant feedback to us in the form of reflection. We cannot separate the actions of children from their environment. So consider if what the child is doing might be reflecting something back to you. If you're seeing an aggressive child, are you being aggressive? If you're seeing a frustrated child, are you maybe putting out impatience or frustration? So connection requires that we take responsibility for our own state of being. And I see that a lot where people are saying, oh, this child's being aggressive. And when I go in and I watch the interactions, a lot of times the adults involved are reacting in an aggressive way. So we shouldn't be surprised if we react aggressively to a child. We're very, very likely they're going to react aggressively to us. And that's not always, because children have other environments too, but just something to be aware of. All right, so,
yeah. When you come in and visit with us, you have yet to tell me, like, hey, this is the reflection that I'm seeing, you know what I'm saying? Like,
oh, sure.
So what I would like to see is if we have that, feel free to say this is what I'm seeing. Like, he's
definitely.
acting aggressively because this is what I noticed from you, and kind of that way we know, yes, this child is going to drive you bonkers, but here's, like you said, what you can work on.
Yeah, here's what you can work on.
You can't change that child, so,
yep.
because we've had conversations, but I know that we haven't at least you haven't dug deep into me to say,
Into me.
this is what I'm really saying, you know, so
Yeah.
I would just encourage you to do that with me at least.
Yeah, and that's definitely my role, and that's where it's good for you guys. This is why I love that so many of the centers I'm working with are coming to my trainings, because it's so helpful that we have that common language, and you can start thinking about this stuff or asking me, do you see that coming into play here? You know, just an example to go back to my friend Chris Megan that I worked with, and he was pretty aware of this stuff because we'd had all kinds of conversations about it. One day I walked into the, we call it the milieu, that's where the kids lived, and he was interacting with the boys, and the boys just loved him because he was very interactive with them, very fun, but for some reason I could tell he was really edgy that day. He was just kind of had this underlying irritation, and within about 5 minutes of him interacting with the boys, because of the way he was kind of throwing things back to them, they started getting edgy, and so they started having these defensive responses back to him, and he goes, what did he say? He kind of started picking on the boys, like, well, you guys are really frustrated today. What's going on with you? Why is everybody so irritable? And because he and I had that relationship, I was able to make a few comments and saying, you know, a few minutes later to be able to say, hey, you just seems like you're kind of edgy today. You're a little bit irritable. And he really caught himself. He immediately caught, oh, this is coming from me. All of this that I'm seeing with the boys is coming from me because I'm edgy and irritable. And as soon as he owned that, the environment just completely returned back to normal. So when kids are connected to us, they will definitely reflect back to us what we're feeling. So, principles of connection, it starts with ourselves and our awareness of our thoughts, feelings, biases, and triggers. So it starts with our own self-connection. We talked about how your perception of the problem doesn't always match the actual problem. That's why we have to have self-awareness. And then you guys kind of filled out the should, so we'll skip that part. This bottom part is really interesting about biases. Daycares are significantly more likely to discipline and expel black students, for example, as well as boys. And that goes beyond statistical significance. So it's not just that there might be more black children in poverty. It is daycares are more likely to expel black students. So we want to be aware of those biases. It's not that these daycares are intrinsically prejudiced and they don't like black people. It's just we have these underlying biases that we're not aware of. And so we do want to be aware of those. All right. So connection with children is crucial to their health and well-being. Safety starts with the connection. 2 questions children are constantly asking, am I safe and am I loved? So we want to answer these 2 questions in the positive. Safety is the most important. We always want to be able to answer yes to that. But if we can answer yes to the second, then we really have a good environment. The sheet that I handed it out in my first training too. I will stop handing this sheet out when every single daycare I walk into is doing this, like every single minute of the day, and then I'll retire because you guys will have no use for me. So just hang this on your wall, read it every morning. I love this sheet. And the more you do this, the more positive your interactions will be with children. And you'll go home at the end of the day going, wow, I love the kids that I work with. And that's what we want you guys to feel at the end of the day. Also, children do not have a developed sense of self or the innate ability to self-regulate. So they don't really develop this until later. In fact, we're still learning how to self-regulate as adults, right? A lot of times we're influenced by our environment and we don't even realize it. So as adults, we have to keep that connection to them, feedback to them, because that really starts to teach them who they are. Without that input, children will become anxious, dysregulated, or begin negative attention seeking. So if we're disconnected and we're not doing this connection with the kids, our classroom will become more and more dysregulated. Does that make sense? So if you start to see that in your classroom, it might be a cue, hey, I need to get connected. I need to start really doing these things, making these connections with the kids. It's not about using more discipline most of the time. It's about getting that connection. And then connection provides the starting point for all discipline because a child who is connected to us naturally listens, cares what we think, and tries to model our actions. So I'm really at disadvantage if I walk into your classroom as far as trying to help you out behaviorally with children because I don't start with that connection with that kid. So if you have that connection, you've really got a head start. There's so much you can do once you have that. And let me just went through that sheet. Good discipline starts and ends with connection. Challenge yourself to find discipline solutions that do not break the connection between you and the child. So this is a really important point I work with on parents, is for some reason we have this perception, oh, the child did something wrong, now they have to be in trouble. I have to be mad at them. I can't be connected to them. I have to be mean or angry. And that's just really not true. We can set boundaries with children, we can be firm, we can have discipline, but we don't have to break that connection. Does that make sense? So that's something to really think about. So think about how you can find discipline solutions that start, end, and hopefully in the middle have connection as that element. It doesn't mean we can't be firm and set boundaries. We can definitely do that. We can definitely set a boundary of, hey, it's nap time right now, you shouldn't be crawling all over me. That's okay to set that boundary, but I don't have to be mean and break that connection. Okay, so we have next activity on your worksheet, and then we'll just can we just take a quick break so you guys can kind of get up, get some food if you want to, get some water. So we'll try to take a 5-minute break. And then you've got a couple of questions on your worksheet about connection.
If you didn't sign in when you came in, if you'd make sure to do that, so I'm going to write your certificates off of our sign-in sheets.
That was the.
I got that. Thank you. Otherwise, it would have been wrong.